What led me down the path of King James onlyism? Well, for the first 5 years after getting saved, I had no idea there was any differences at all in the Bibles that were like I read from the NIV and I read from the ESV, and I never owned a King James Bible. I grew up going to church and I had an NIV. I just didn't know there was any major differences between them. So what ended up happening with me is one day I was listening to a sermon online, and the preacher was Pastor Lawson from Temple Baptist Church in Knoxville, Tennessee, and he was going over the fact that the NIV changes Lucifer to Morning Star. I was like, oh wow, that's pretty significant. Now keep in mind at this point, I have no idea that there are people who are called King James onlyists who believe the King James Bible is perfect. I have no idea that a label exists or those people exist. So just by the fact that he said that there's a change in the NIV to the King James, and I had only recently been like kind of like tuning into Charles Lawson. Like he's a King James only preacher, but I didn't really know that. I just listened to him because he talks about interesting topics. But that sparked my attention. I asked my wife Laura to order a King James Bible, and she did. And it came from Amazon. It was like from I think it's like Christian Art Publishers or something, like a $15 or $20 King James Bible. I started reading from that Bible, and everything in my walk with Christ did a complete 180 because this was unlike anything I've read. Like when I was reading the ESV and the NIV, first of all, it felt like a chore to read the Bible. I knew I had to, I knew I was supposed to. It just didn't, like, nothing was drawing me into it. With the King James, it was like living water. It's like I couldn't stop. I had to keep reading this. I was reading it up to like 7 different times in a day. Like I kept, like, it was so different. It was refreshing me. It was when I would ask God questions, it was like he would immediately answer me in the Bible, no matter if I was just reading through it normally or just randomly opening it up. And I was like, it was getting to the point where every single time I would go, we'd be like leaving, all the kids getting in the car, and we need to go real quick. I'd real quickly just run back to my room and open the Bible real quick and say, "Is there an answer for me in the Bible?" Like, and there would be. Like, I've asked a specific question, and here's the specific answer, and it just kept happening over and over and over again until I submit it. Like, there is something really strange going on, and I believe this Bible is from God. Now, I will say that because of all the influences of that are out there, I didn't believe it was like perfect right away. I believed it was, this is God's word for us. Obviously, something is different here. At least in my life, I have experienced it, and I can tell this is unlike anything I've ever experienced before. Um, but I was listening to Chuck Missler at the time. He also cast some doubt on some verses in the King James. So in my brain, I was like, okay, maybe there are a couple mistranslations. I don't know, but this is definitely unlike anything I've read before. And at that point, I had become King James only without having any idea that there were King James onlyists. I didn't know there were churches that only read from the King James Bible. I didn't know there were authors like Gail Riplinger or Peter Ruckman or Sam Gipp or any of these authors who write about the King James Bible. I was just, the Bible itself converted me. Um, and a lot of people, when they say they deconverted from King James Williams because they grew up in it and going to church, it's so weird to me, like hearing that. But I also understand it's like that's what they grew up in. But for me, it's like this Bible, I know the difference. Like I've seen the difference in my life personally. Like it is a 180-degree turn that happened. Like I was my interest for uh the worldly things, carnal things, fleshly things. I lost all of those interests, and everything about became about Jesus when I started reading from the King James Bible. My life changed. Um, so people like to say all kinds of different things against it, whether it's archaisms or mistranslations. But I've seen how this Bible has worked in my life. I've seen how the Lord has spoken to me through this book, unlike anything else. And now that I've studied the topic in depth, I am 100% certain that this is perfect by the word, even by the letter. So that's
Amen.
kind of how I came to it. It was unlike a lot of people, but I was only 26 years old. I didn't really struggle that much with the the these and the thous, as people they like to say, that's a stumbling block because you don't understand it. I have no problem understanding it. I even my son, I forget how old he was at the time, but he was 3 grade levels behind in reading. He has autism. He was able to read it just fine and understand it. I was curious if he could, um, but I mean, people telling me that people don't understand his Bible, I just don't understand. Like it's very clear, it's very easy to read, even though it's from 400 years ago.